my beautiful friends, it's Amanda here, and today we're talking about some new mini palettes from ColourPop Cosmetics. This is the Love Struck collection, and this little collection is 5 palettes, and each one has 5 eyeshadow pans. These will be launching on the ColourPop website on Thursday, January 7th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So make sure you check your time zones if you're interested in being on the site at launch time. These palettes are going to be priced at $10 US a piece. I'm going to go over all the details with you today. I'm going to show you close-ups of each palette. We're going to do finger and brush swatches of each palette. And I have a whole bunch of swatch comparisons too. So let's get started first with this palette called Ballad. We've got very romantic packaging styling, makes sense with a Love Struck collection. It's got a very ethereal, romantic feel, lots of floral and scrolls and wreaths and floaty clouds. So here's a close-up of the outer box, and here is a close-up of the packaging. You can see that same styling on both the box and the palette itself. This is all heavy-duty plastic packaging with a lid that sort of snaps shut. It's not magnetic, there's not a clasp, it just seems like a mechanism of the hinge. Inside we see the square pans. These are removable and magnetic, and they are the same size and shape as the previous square pans we've seen in like Sandstone and the Fade into Hue palette. So these can be mixed and matched just like their circular pans could. This Ballad palette has 1 matte, 2 shimmers, and 2 mattes with glitter. Let's take a look at the swatches now. The finger swatches are on top, and then the brush swatches are pictured below. They're done with just a dry, flat brush. And I think you can tell from these swatches that we are getting a nice, smooth, opaque sort of application with both the finger and the brush. So that's definitely a good sign. Now let's move on to the Lyric palette. Similar styling here, just a different colorway. Now when we take a close-up look at the Lyric box, I just want to point out that none of the shades on this one nor on the previous, the Ballad one, have any sort of eye safety warnings, but this shade Unsung, I want to take a closer look at. I'm assuming that they're going to be marketing this as a foiled shadow, but it definitely has the look and feel of a pressed glitter in my opinion. So I'm not really sure what to make of this. The glitter particles are quite small. There is a lot of that adhering base in there. So it does feel a little bit more foily than just a plain old pressed glitter, but it still does have those little chunky particles in there. You can kind of tell both in the pan and in the swatch. So it doesn't have an eye safety warning. I'm not really sure what to make of this shade, but I think it's just worth talking about since glitters and eye safety in general is something that I make a point of speaking of on this channel. Now let's go to the Crush palette. This is our toasty, warm, orangey, reddish brown type of shades. This Crush palette does have an eye safety little warning here. This is for pigments. It's not a pressed glitter. You'll be able to see that in the close-up. But if you're curious about eye safety warnings for these pigment shades, definitely go and check out my video that I did about the Wine Not collection. When I talked about the Wine and Only palette, I went a little bit more in depth in that video about how to patch test, why you should patch test, and what are the possible implications of these pigment warnings. I just think it's good general knowledge. We want to be informed consumers. I think that's the goal of really anybody who's watching reviews in particular. So make sure you check that one out. I'll link it in the description box for you as well. That info will also be relevant when we talk about this Cherish palette. Although I am very happily surprised that there's only one shade with that little pigment warning in this palette. It is something we commonly see with very red shades, and there are a lot of reds in this palette. So this center shade called Faith does have that not intended for immediate eye area warning. Somebody said in my comment section on Instagram that this looked like a Valentine's Day collection. I agree. This would have made a really sensible choice for a Valentine's Day collection. Here in the Cherish palette, we have 2 mattes, 2 shimmers, and 1 matte with some micro glitters. No pressed glitters, no questionable, maybe foiled, maybe glitter type of shades in this one. Now let's take a look at the swatches. I will say across all 5 of these palettes, I'm very impressed with the formula. The mattes feel super, super soft. Even these really red-based shades, which do tend to feel drier, not just among the ColourPop palettes, but in general, these feel very, very soft, smooth, almost creamy feeling to the touch. So happy about that. The last one in this little palette series is called the Amore palette. This palette actually carries 2 eye safety warnings, one for a pressed glitter and then one for the shade on the end called Darling, which is probably forged red pigments, seeing as it's not a pressed glitter. So I just wanted to point those out. This Amore palette does have 2 out of 5 shades, not technically intended for use in the eye area. I'll just go ahead and point those out to you in the palette. Just to be clear, it is the shade in the center there called Affair, which is pretty easily identifiable as a glitter, and then that deepest matte shade called Darling. Shade-wise, this is the one that sparks my interest the most because I just love purple, I love mauve and pink, and so this is really my favorite color scheme of all the palettes. And just look at these swatches. The mattes are lovely and opaque. They just look great with the brush swatch. I'm really, really impressed with the formula of these new square pan shadows across the board. Now, you know what time it is. It's comparison time. It's everybody's favorite time, or maybe not everybody's favorite time, but it's my favorite time. I decided to just do 4 comparisons per palette. There are 5 palettes in this collection, and it's a lot of swatching. When you add in the fact that I also swatch each of these palettes individually, it adds up. 25 swatches is about where I start to max out, so don't worry, I will do more comparisons on my Instagram stories. Just keep an eye out for Makeup.Just.For.Fun on Instagram, and you'll be able to request anything that you wanted to see that you don't see in this video. But I tried my best to pick things that I thought were going to be the most similar, and hopefully the comparisons that are the most interesting and the most helpful. I will say I'm surprised that the Baroque palette isn't as similar as I thought it was going to be. Baroque looks so much more blue in comparison to Ballad. Next is That's Taupe. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to want to see this one, and for good reason. These are pretty darn close. I would say Ballad is a little bit more gray, especially in those mattes, whereas That's Taupe looks more brown in comparison to Ballad. This is another one I was surprised by. I really thought that this Blow and Smoke palette was going to be a super dupe. And, you know, I mean, they're similar. You probably get some similar looks. Ballad is quite a bit lighter, and Blow and Smoke looks so much more of a slate blue-gray in comparison. Kind of crazy how that works. Now, this is by far the closest comparison. These Stone Cold Fox shades, you are going to get the exact same looks out of these. The only one that even looks a little bit not like a dupe is that deeper gray matte shade. But other than that, these are so similar. Now let's do some comparisons with the Lyric palette. This is one that I could literally swatch all day. I could make an hour-long swatch comparison because this is definitely a very standard neutral brownish gold type of palette. So I think just limiting myself to 4 was probably a good idea. As you can see, Bare Necessities pretty similar. Shimmers are a little bit different, but overall not crazy different. The Going Coconuts palette, not as similar as I thought it was going to be, especially when it comes to those shimmer shades. Definitely a similar feeling. You're going to get a similar vibe eye look out of these, but as far as one-to-one shade dupes goes, not really that close. Nude Mood palette is more similar than Going Coconuts. Going Coconuts has quite a neutral undertone across the board, and Nude Mood is decidedly warmer, more of that toasty, bronzy gold that Lyric is really bringing to the table color scheme wise. And those two gold shimmer shades, the like dark gold, are really similar. Now, unexpected best match is the Grandeur palette. This is from the Dark Blooms collection that they released just a little while ago for their fall collection. These are so close. It's crazy. I was not expecting this much of a similarity, but these are pretty darn close. Next, let's talk about the Crush palette. This is another one that probably has 101 dupes in my collection alone. So I just tried to do the best I could. This Nude Mood palette was certainly at the top of my list for comparisons, and for good reason. Are all of the shades exact dead-on dupes? No, definitely not. But you're going to end up with some pretty similar eye looks with both of these palettes. Next up is the Double Entendre palette. I don't even know if they still sell this one, but these are pretty much the same shades. Really, the main difference here is that darker orange matte shade in Crush has some micro glitters in it, and the Double Entendre palette doesn't. But overall, these are really similar. Now, the California Love palette does have a bit of a difference in that lighter orange matte shade. So it looks a little bit more yellowy. It's the same color scheme. Personally, I do think that the California Love palette overall is just a little bit more interesting viewed in its entirety, but as we're seeing from these swatches, and I'm sure you can sort of extrapolate in your mind, this is a very common color scheme, and I could probably come up with 100 more swatch comparisons that are this similar. So here's the whatever palette, just why not? Next, let's talk about the Cherish palette. This one is more reddish, whereas Crush was more orangey. And the kind of wild card in this Cherish palette is that lighter matte has sort of a pinky undertone to the brown. So that's where you're going to see a lot of the variation in the comparisons here. For example, the Ornate palette overall is a lot warmer and a little bit more of a golden vibe to it. That same idea is not quite as pronounced in the Whatever palette. When you take a look at those lighter brown mattes, you can tell the Whatever matte version is a little bit warmer, still not quite that pink undertone. The red shimmer and the red matte in these two palettes is very similar. And you're going to see that same thing in the X's and O's palette. This one, the last 3 shades are very similar. That deepest brown matte shade is almost the exact same color. We're just getting a little bit of difference in finish here when it comes down to the comparison between Cherish and X's and O's. And the last palette that I want to compare this one to is actually So Jaded. This is kind of a wild card comparison for me because I don't think of So Jaded as being a very red heavy palette, but this is by far the best comparison when we look at one-to-one shades. These So Jaded shades are almost an exact match for the Cherish palette. Last round of comparisons is for the Amore palette. This, again, it's a pretty common color scheme. We've seen it a lot, not just from ColourPop, but this purpley, mauvey kind of moment. It's not really anything new, The Wine and Only palette has a couple of shades that are similar. This is more of a similar vibe than a one-to-one match. Next, let's look at the Give It To Me Straight palette. This was the first one I thought of when I started grabbing shades to compare to Amore, and it's not as dead on of a match as I thought it was going to be, but it's still, same old story, similar vibes, similar eye looks for sure. Now, the next one is the closest match. This is the Ménage à Moi palette from their holiday release. These, I'm telling you, are so close. The main difference is the very last shade, that deepest matte. It's a little bit brighter, a little bit more purpley in the Amore palette, but these are very close. And the last comparison I have is with the Bye Bye Birdie palette. Bye Bye Birdie is overall a little bit brighter, more intense, more colorful than the Amore palette, but not crazy different, if we're being honest. So I just want to round up this video with my thoughts. I like to save my opinions for the end and just give you the info first. First thing, let's address the elephant in the room. These palettes look like Natasha Denona palettes. Yes, they definitely do. There's no denying that. And I've seen a few people on social media that are very angry about this. I can sort of understand that, and then sort of not really agreeing with it at the same time. Look, it's really similar. It is. And I'm sure it was designed to look similar. But at the end of the day, this is not like an incredibly innovative palette layout. People have done it before, people have done it since. Some look more similar to each other than others, but it's a rectangular palette with square shadows in it. I don't know. I don't really think it's that big of a deal. Palettes and packaging and color schemes, it's all been done before. It'll all be done again. And personally, I don't mind that. It's kind of nice to see different iterations of the same idea. So if that bothers you, fair enough. I can see that. I mean, I'm sure it was made to look the same, but at the end of the day, I personally just don't really see that as an issue. When it comes to the palettes themselves, the quality is great. Very impressed with the formulas, the performance. You know me, I wish there weren't pressed glitters in non-eye safe shades, but that's just sort of a broken record at this point. I don't love the styling, but I also don't hate it, and I am happy to see them just doing something different. I love the idea of a mini palette. I really like to see them branching out into these smaller, more curated palettes. However, I wish they had actually done something exciting. These color schemes, as you saw from the swatch comparisons, are just very done over and over again by ColourPop, by every other brand in the world. I wish they would have taken this moment to really do something really wild, really different. Imagine if they started off the first launch of the year with just blowing us out of the water with something crazy, something bright, different color schemes, different color combinations. Personally, I feel that that's the only direction that brands can really go, especially now people are kind of getting tired of the same old thing. Look, I love neutrals as much as the next person, but I think to keep people excited, we need to see something exciting. And I would love to see some bold color combinations, some more cool tone neutrals, kind of stepping into something odd, maybe something a little bit weird, or, just something different. I'm excited to see what happens next. I hope that this format sticks around because I think the quality is good. I think this could be a really fun idea. I just hope that this is the first step into this format and that we see something a little bit more exciting come next. So that's all I have for you. I'm so glad that you took the time to watch today. I would love to hear what you think about these palettes. Are you interested in them? Are any of these going on your wish list? Am I totally off base and you just want more neutrals? That's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. I'm just glad you're here. And no matter how our opinions differ, I truly appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Oh, also, I love your face, and I will talk to you soon, and I think you're adorable and sweet. Okay, bye!